The first attack came before anyone could believe it was real. Colonists on the edge of human space had seen strange signals for weeks, but they thought it was just static, interference from the nearby nebula. Nobody expected the sky to burn open with alien warships. Nobody expected the first thing to touch ground would not be soldiers or machines, but beasts. The creatures were massive, each one like a walking nightmare. Some looked like armored reptiles with jaws wide enough to snap a man in half. Others were six-legged shadows with claws that could cut metal. They did not land gently. They were dropped from orbit in pods that split open on impact, and the ground itself shook when the monsters crawled out. The first colony to be hit tried to fight back with rifles, drones, and barricades, but it was like shooting pebbles at a hurricane. Entire farming fields were torn apart, steel walls bent under strikes of bone and claw. The beasts were not just strong, they were trained. They moved in packs, herding humans into corners, cutting off escape. Panic spread fast. The aliens who sent them never even showed themselves. To them, humans were not worth a real battle. Their war beasts would do all the work. But humans are not simple prey. Among the survivors of that first attack was a farmer named Elias. He was no soldier, just a man who spent his life raising cattle and working the soil. When the beasts came, he did what others did. He ran. Yet as he hid in the barn, watching one of the monsters stalk through the smoke, he noticed something strange. The creature stopped at the pen where his own animals had been kept. Instead of ripping them apart, it sniffed the air, growled low, and then backed away. For a brief moment, Elias saw fear in its eyes. It wasn't afraid of him. It was afraid of something else. By the time the military arrived, half the colony was gone. Elias was among the few who lived. The officials tried to make sense of it, but reports were confused and bloody. Soldiers spoke of things too fast to shoot, too tough to kill. Others whispered about how the beasts moved like they were following commands from a mind far away. The official order was simple: evacuate survivors, regroup, and prepare for more. Because the aliens were not stopping. Every day, new colonies sent distress calls. Every day, the same war beasts came. The news hit Earth like fire. For centuries, humanity had fought wars with each other, built weapons, and made peace only after burning fields. But now the enemy was not another nation. It was something from beyond the stars. Something that treated humans as if they were vermin to be cleared out. Fear spread, but with fear came anger. People wanted to fight back. Yet the question remained: how do you fight creatures bred only for war? Elias found himself pulled into the heart of this question, not because he was a soldier, but because of what he had seen. When the officials interviewed survivors, his story stood out. A war beast, afraid? That made no sense. But the more he explained, the more scientists grew interested. They asked him what animals he kept, what signs he noticed, what sounds the beast made. It sounded foolish to the generals who wanted missiles and tanks, but some believed there was a clue here, something about the instincts of these creatures that could be used. While the colonies bled, research began in secret labs. Samples from wounded beasts were studied. Their DNA was mapped, their brains scanned, and in the ruins of another colony, soldiers captured one alive, chained and drugged, snarling against its restraints. What the scientists found shocked them. These monsters were dangerous, yes, but not gods. They had limits. They had instincts, weaknesses, and perhaps something worse for their masters they could learn. Back on his ruined colony, Elias returned with a small team of researchers. They wanted to test something with his remaining animals. He led them to the fields where he had once kept a breed of massive earthborn bulls, bred strong for heavy work. The beasts had been restless since the attack, pawing at the ground, snorting in the night. When they brought a captured alien creature near the pens, something incredible happened. The bulls did not panic. They roared, charged, and forced the alien beast back against its cage. The scientists could hardly believe their eyes. Earth animals, bred for labor, showed no fear. Instead, they showed dominance. Elias stood there, heart pounding, as he realized the truth. The aliens had sent their war beasts to terrify humanity, but humans had always lived beside powerful creatures. We had tamed wolves into dogs, wild horses into partners, cattle into giants of muscle and bone. We had lived with danger for thousands of years, and we had bent it to our will. The aliens thought they had brought monsters. They did not know we had raised our own. That night, Elias could not sleep. The image stayed in his mind, the war beast shrinking back from his bulls, the way its eyes darted as if it recognized something older, deeper, more terrifying than any command from its masters. He wondered how many other animals across human colonies carried the same fire. How many creatures, dismissed as simple livestock or pets, could stand against alien nightmares if only given the chance. Perhaps the real answer to the alien threat was not more weapons. Perhaps it was the beasts humanity had already tamed. And so a quiet thought began to spread, whispered among soldiers and settlers alike. Maybe the war was not only about fighting. Maybe it was about unleashing what humans had always kept beside us. Elias never thought his quiet life as a farmer would drag him into the center of a war. Yet within days of the first attack, soldiers and scientists treated him like someone important. He did not understand half of the words they used, but he understood what he saw with his own eyes. The alien war beast, chained and snarling, had stepped back from his bulls as if they were predators instead of prey. It was a small thing, but small things mattered when humanity was on the edge of being crushed. The military wanted answers fast. They gathered teams of specialists who tested Earth animals against captured alien beasts. Sometimes the results were clear: dogs barked, but kept their distance. Cats hissed and ran. But other times the results were shocking. Horses refused to be intimidated and kicked with brutal force. Even simple pigs, packed together in numbers, grew aggressive, biting at the strange creature that entered their pen. It became obvious that the war beasts were not invincible. They had instincts that could be broken. Word of these discoveries spread like a secret fire. Colonists whispered that maybe humanity had a chance. No longer did they only talk about evacuation and retreat. Now they spoke about resistance, about using not just guns and ships, but something older and closer to them. Some even joked grimly that humans have been training for this war for thousands of years without knowing it. Still, the enemy did not slow down. Each week, new colonies were attacked. Each time, pods fell from the sky, splitting open with monsters inside. They left ruins behind them, burned homes, crushed vehicles, families scattered. The aliens had not spoken a single word. They had not sent diplomats or demands. They simply unleashed their beasts again and again, as if humanity's survival was nothing but a test. On one distant farming world, soldiers tried something new. Instead of fleeing, they brought the largest herd of earth-bred cattle they could gather and placed them at the edge of the settlement. When the alien beasts came, the herd did not scatter. They stampeded forward with a wall of muscle and horns. The result stunned everyone. The alien creatures were forced back, confused, injured. Soldiers moved in quickly, finishing the fight with weapons. For the first time, an attack was repelled, not by firepower alone, but by the instincts of creatures that had lived alongside humans for centuries. Elias heard the story while sitting in a briefing room with grim-faced officers. He had been brought from his ruined colony to Earth, where endless meetings filled his days. He was no longer just a farmer. Now he was a witness, a symbol of an idea. He listened as generals argued with scientists. The generals wanted weapons that could kill beasts faster. The scientists wanted to understand why Earth animals unsettled them. Elias sat silently, but in his heart, he knew the truth was simple. Humans had always survived by making allies of the strong. Wolves had become dogs, dangerous but loyal. Horses had carried men into wars. Even wild hawks had been trained to hunt. Perhaps now it was time to take the next step, to stand against the alien beasts not with fear, but with the creatures humanity had raised with its own hands. Outside the meetings, fear continued to grow. People on Earth saw endless streams of images from the colonies, broken cities, survivors wandering with hollow eyes, black smoke rising against alien skies. Yet alongside the fear, something else began to appear. Videos spread of farmers leading massive bulls into combat. Clips of armored war dogs charging against creatures twice their size. Grainy images of alien beasts hesitating when faced with animals they had never seen before. These images gave people hope, and hope was more powerful than any weapon. Elias returned one night to the small quarters the military had given him. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling, and thought of his home, of the animals he had lost, of the beasts that had stepped back in fear. He did not know why he had survived when so many others had not. But he knew one thing: this war would not end with only guns and soldiers. It would end with something far older, an understanding of how life itself could be shaped, tamed, and turned against those who believed they alone controlled power. In the weeks that followed, a new program began in secret. They called it the Domestication Project. Elias became part of it, though he still felt out of place among soldiers and scientists. The idea was bold: to train Earth creatures not just as farm animals or pets, but as partners in war, to pit instinct against instinct, beast against beast. It sounded mad to some, even reckless, but to those who had seen alien war beasts up close, it made perfect sense. And so the stage was set. The aliens continued their silent, brutal campaign, but humanity was no longer only running. They were preparing, they were watching, and deep inside barns, cages, and training fields across human space, Earth's creatures began to learn the sound of war. The Domestication Project began quietly, hidden from the public eye. Official reports still spoke of evacuation plans, defensive fleets, and new weapons research. But behind closed doors, in training yards and research domes, the real experiment was underway. They brought in every kind of animal humanity had depended on for survival: bulls, horses, ducks, falcons, even packs of wolves bred in captivity. Some thought it was a waste of time. Others whispered that it might be the only chance left. Elias watched the first trials with a farmer's eye. He stood at the edge of a reinforced arena as soldiers dragged in a chained alien war beast. The thing was massive, its black scales catching the light, its eyes burning with cruel intelligence. It threshed against the restraints, claws sparking against steel. The soldiers were tense, fingers on triggers. But Elias kept his eyes on the animals in the opposite pen. 6 great bulls, each weighing more than a ton, stamped and snorted as the beast roared. The air smelled of sweat and dust, of fear and challenge. Then the gate opened. The war beast lunged forward, expecting prey. Instead, the bulls charged as one, heads lowered, horns sharp. The impact shook the ground. Dust exploded into the air as the alien creature staggered back, howling in shock. It had never been met like this before, not with flight, not with fear, but with fury. The soldiers shouted, some ready to fire. But Elias raised his hand. Wait, he said softly, though his voice carried. The bulls pressed forward, hooves pounding, until the beast was cornered. For the first time, it hesitated, then let out a sound that was not rage but submission. The arena fell silent. Scientists scribbled notes furiously. Officers exchanged glances. Elias only nodded. It's not about killing them, he said. It's about showing them we are not prey. Word of the trial spread, though the project was meant to be secret. Soon other tests followed. Dogs were trained in packs, darting and snapping at smaller war beasts, harrying them like wolves once hunted mammoths. Falcons dove from above, striking at sensitive eyes and driving the creatures into confusion. Even horses, armored and trained, carried riders into direct clashes, their speed overwhelming the beast's heavy frames. It was brutal work, dangerous and costly, but to prove something vital, alien war beasts were not untouchable. They could be resisted. They could be outmatched. Yet the aliens were not idle. Every attack on a colony grew sharper, more precise. The beasts came in greater numbers, sometimes accompanied by strange machines that guided their movements. Colonies vanished overnight, leaving behind smoking ruins and silence. Humanity was running out of time. Fleets were stretched thin, armies exhausted. If the domestication project failed, there would be nothing left but surrender or extinction. One evening, Elias sat by a campfire outside the training grounds. The soldiers had invited him to eat with them, though he still felt more farmer than fighter. A young soldier leaned forward and asked, "Do you really think this can work? Animals against those things?" Elias thought for a long moment before answering. "It's not animals against them," he said. "It's us with them. We've always survived by finding allies in the wild. We didn't invent strength, we learned it from the creatures around us. That's what the aliens don't understand. They fight with fear. We fight with trust." The soldier nodded slowly, as if those words were heavier than any order from a general. Round the fire, others listened. In the dark beyond the flames, the sound of beasts echoed: the snort of bulls, the howl of wolves, the restless pawing of hooves. To the soldiers, it no longer sounded like simple noise. It sounded like an army waiting to rise. The next trial would not be in a cage. Scouts had reported an incoming attack on a frontier colony, a mining settlement with little protection. Instead of evacuating, the commanders decided to test the project in real battle. It was risky, perhaps insane, but there was no other way to know. They brought in herds of trained bulls, packs of dogs, even a flight of falcons fitted with small cameras to record the fight. Elias insisted on going with them. "I've seen them," he said. "I know what makes them falter. You'll need me there." And so, days later, Elias stood once again on the edge of war. This time he was not a farmer hiding in a barn. He was part of a force unlike any the galaxy had seen. Round him, soldiers loaded weapons, handlers calmed restless beasts, and the air thrummed with tension. Above, the sky split open as alien pods streaked downward in fire. The ground shook as they struck, and the first war beasts crawled out, snarling and ready to kill. But this time, humanity did not run. The colony of Stonefield had little to protect it, just a scattering of mining huts, a few armored vehicles, and now the strange army that had been brought in from Earth. Miners stood on rooftops, eyes wide as they watched handlers lead massive bulls into formation. Packs of armored dogs strained at their leashes, growling low. A line of horses pawed at the ground, their riders sitting tall in simple combat gear. Above, falcons circled restlessly, their sharp eyes fixed on the skies. Soldiers whispered among themselves. They had guns, yes, but this time their hope lay not in steel or fire, but in muscle, instinct, and trust. The sky split open. Alien pods tore through the atmosphere, burning as they fell. They slammed into the ground with thunder, and the earth shattered. From the shattered pods, the war beasts emerged, hulking shapes of scale and bone, snarls echoing like thunderclaps. There were 6 at first, then more, each one larger than a tank, claws flashing as they tore at the ground. Their eyes glowed faintly, as if some unseen master guided them. The miners screamed and ducked behind barricades. Soldiers braced for the charge, and then Elias stepped forward, standing with the handlers at the front. "Steady," he whispered, though no one seemed to hear but the animals. His bulls shifted, snorting clouds of steam into the cold air. The dogs lowered themselves, muscles tight. For a heartbeat, the battlefield went silent. Then the war beasts roared and charged. The first clash was like mountains colliding. Bulls thundered forward, horns locked against alien claws. Dust and dirt flew into the air as the ground shook beneath their weight. The beasts snapped and tore, but the bulls did not give ground. One drove its horns deep into the side of a creature. Blood sprang black against the dust. Another stomped with hooves so heavy that the alien's leg cracked. The handler shouted, guiding the herd, and slowly the line of bulls, first the war beasts, backed off to the side. The dogs were unleashed. Dozens of them darted across the ground, weaving in and out of the monster's reach. They leapt at soft joints, tearing at exposed flesh. Some were swatted aside, bones breaking, but the rest kept coming, their fury relentless. The aliens roared in confusion, unable to focus on the swarm of snapping jaws. Soldiers fired their rifles from behind, aiming carefully where the dogs had already wounded the beasts above. Falcons dove like arrows, their talons slashed at glowing eyes, driving the creatures into blind rage. One beast stumbled, shaking its head wildly as the bird started again and again. That was when the horses charged, with riders carrying long spears tipped with steel. They swept into the chaos, hooves struck with crushing force, and spears pierced deep. For a moment, it looked like something from an ancient war cavalry charge. But against monsters from another world, Elias stood in the middle of it all, heart pounding. He had no weapon, no armor. But he shouted orders as if the animals could understand him, and perhaps they did, because the bulls fought harder when he called. The dogs surged forward when he raised his arm. Soldiers glanced at him with awe, as though he were more than a farmer now. He was something else, something the beasts themselves seemed to hear. The battle raged for an hour. Dust filled the air, blood stained the ground, and cries of both man and beast echoed across the colony. But slowly, incredibly, the tide turned. One by one, the alien war beasts fell. Some were trampled, others gored. Others collapsed under a storm of bullets once their defenses were broken. The miners climbed down from their rooftops, staring in disbelief. For the first time since the invasion began, a colony had not been destroyed. It had fought and it had won. Asterisk. When the last beast fell, silence spread across the battlefield. Soldiers stood panting, bloodied, staring at the ground littered with carcasses of monsters that once seemed unstoppable. Dogs limped back to their handlers, tails still wagging despite wounds. Horses snorted, eyes wild, but stood firm. The bulls stamped the earth as if daring more enemies to come. Above, the falcons circled once more before landing on the arms of their trainers. Elias sank to his knees, exhausted but alive. Round him, the soldiers began to cheer, their voices rough with disbelief and relief. The miners joined in, their cries echoing across the ruins. For a moment, humanity tasted something it had not felt in weeks: victory. But as the cheering faded, Elias looked to the sky. The alien pods had been only the beginning. Somewhere above, in the silent black, their masters were watching. They had seen their beasts fall. They would not ignore this. Elias felt a chill crawl through him as he whispered to himself, "Now they know." The victory at Stonefield spread faster than light. Soldiers recorded the battle. Miners told their stories. And soon every colony knew what had happened. Images of bulls goring alien war beasts appear on every screen. Footage of dogs dragging down creatures twice their size filled the networks. For the first time since the war began, humanity did not just whisper about survival. They shouted about fighting back. And everywhere, people asked the same question: if Earth animals could fight these monsters, what else could be trained? What else could be unleashed? On Earth, the generals held secret meetings. Some wanted to expand the domestication project immediately, spreading herds and packs across every frontier world. Others warned that the aliens would adapt, and that what worked once might not work again. The arguments were heated, but one truth was clear: humanity had stumbled on something powerful. They had turned the enemy's own weapon into a weakness, and that meant the enemy would respond. Elias knew it too. He had returned to Earth briefly, a reluctant hero now invited to speak at briefings. He hated the noise of politicians, the endless talk of strategy, but he understood what was coming. They won't stop, he told a room full of commanders. You showed them their beasts can bleed. Now they'll send worse. The generals listened in silence, but no one argued. He was right. Weeks later, the next wave of attacks began. At first it looked the same: pods falling, beasts unleashed. But something was different. The creatures were larger now, stronger, armored with bony plates that shrugged off bullets. Some carried strange growths on their backs that glowed with alien energy, as if weapons had been grafted into their flesh. These were not the same beasts that had first terrified colonies. They were evolved, altered, designed to counter what humans had done. The aliens had learned the first battle against these new beasts was a nightmare. On a forest colony, a herd of bulls was sent to meet them. At first the clash looked the same: the thunder of hooves, the crush of horns. But then the beasts opened their mouths, and streams of burning liquid poured out, setting the ground ablaze. Balls screamed as fire consumed them. The soldiers tried to fight back, but the beasts cut through the herd like knives through paper. By the end of the day, the colony was ash, its people gone. The message was clear. The aliens had raised the stakes. Fear returned quickly. Videos of Stonefield's victory were drowned out by footage of burning forests and shattered settlements. People whispered that the aliens were gods, always one step ahead, but Elias refused to believe it. He returned to the training grounds, to the domestication project, and looked at the animals waiting there. Wolves pacing restlessly in their cages, horses snorting as handlers calmed them, even lions and tigers brought from ancient reserves, their eyes glowing with untamed fire. He thought of how humanity had always adapted, always risen to meet new challenges. If the aliens could change their beasts, so could humans change theirs. The scientists agreed. They began to breed stronger bulls, faster dogs, smarter birds. They experimented with armor, fitting plates onto animals without slowing them down. Some even proposed genetic modification crossing traits, enhancing senses, building a new kind of war companion. The generals hesitated, worried about losing control. But with every new attack, the hesitation grew weaker. Humanity had no choice but to push forward. One night, Elias walked the rows of cages alone. The animals watched him with steady eyes, as if they understood. He stopped at the pen of a massive bull, scarred from earlier battles, but still alive, still proud. They think they can make monsters, he whispered. But we've lived with monsters for thousands of years. We don't fear them, we tame them, and we'll tame worse if we have to. The bull snorted, stamping its hoof, and Elias felt something stir in his chest. Not fear, not even anger. Something older, something human. The next battle would prove if they were ready. Scouts reported a massive alien force moving toward another colony, one larger than Stonefield, one with more lives to lose. The commanders looked at each other, then at Elias. We'll test the new breeds, one of them said, and we'll see if humanity can adapt faster than the enemy. Elias nodded. He did not know if they would win, but he knew this. The war had changed. It was no longer just humans against aliens. It was instinct against instinct, evolution against evolution, and humanity had always been the species that refused to be prey. Asterisk, the colony of Ironvale was chosen for the test. It was larger than Stonefield, with sprawling factories and tens of thousands of settlers. If the aliens wanted to make an example, Ironvale was the perfect target. The people knew it too. They packed their belongings, ready to flee at the first sign of fire from the sky. But this time, the commanders told them to stay. This time, humanity would not abandon a colony. This time, they would fight with everything they had. The domestication project had grown far beyond a handful of bulls and dogs. Entire breeding centers had been set up, producing stronger, faster animals. Wolves were trained to move in coordinated packs, each one responding to whistles and hand signals. Birds of prey had cameras mounted on them, letting commanders see the battlefield from above. Lions and tigers were unleashed in controlled trials, showing that even the most ancient predators could learn to follow human cues. And the bulls, once farm animals, had become living tanks. Massive, armored with plates of steel, they now bore spiked collars and reinforced horns. They were no longer simple cattle. They were war beasts of earth. Elias stood at the center of it all, no longer just a farmer. The soldiers called him Handler One, though he still felt like a man from the fields. Round him, handlers checked straps, whispered to their animals, and waited. Above, falcons circled nervously, wings cutting against the gray sky. The air was heavy, as if the world itself held its breath. Then the alarms rang. Alien pods tore through the atmosphere, more than Ironvale had ever seen. They slammed into the ground in waves, and from them crawled nightmares. These were the new breeds of war beasts, larger, stronger, their bodies fused with alien technology. Some spat fire, others bristled with bone spikes that shot like arrows. Their eyes glowed with cruel hunger as they surged forward. Behind the barricades, civilians screamed. Soldiers raised rifles. Elias lifted his hand. Now, the ground shook as Earth's beasts charged. The armored bulls met the aliens head-on, horns crashing into plated hides, steel clanged against bone. Some bulls fell, torn open by claws, but others drove their enemies back, trampling them under sheer weight. Wolves darted between legs, snapping at tendons, dragging beasts down with coordinated fury. Birds swooped, striking at glowing eyes and tearing at vulnerable flesh. And then the lions came roaring, leaping with terrifying grace, sinking claws into alien throats. The battlefield was chaos. A storm of muscle and blood. Elias ran with the handlers, shouting commands. He waved flags, blew whistles, his voice carrying over the noise. And the animals responded. The bulls regrouped when called, charging together in a wool of horns. The wolves circled and drove their prey where Elias pointed. Even the lions seemed to hear his cry, focusing their rage where he directed. To the soldiers, it was madness. To Elias, it was natural. Humanity had always fought with allies, and these were simply allies with fur and claws. But the aliens had not come to lose. A new monster stepped from one of the shattered pods, taller than any before, its body gleaming with armored plates that pulsed with light. It opened its jaws and a scream like thunder shook the ground. The earth beasts faltered for a moment, sensing the danger. The creature charged, scattering bulls and wolves alike, its claws tearing through steel armor. It lifted one of the bulls and hurled it aside as if it were nothing. Soldiers fired desperately, bullets sparking harmlessly against its hide. Fear rippled through the human line. Elias felt it too. For a heartbeat, he froze. Then his eyes turned to the scarred bull, the one from Stonefield. Older now, but still standing tall. He rushed to its side, placed a hand on its massive neck, and whispered. No one heard the words but the bull. Then he stepped back and raised his arm. With a bellow that shook the air, the bull charged. The clash was like lightning striking the earth. The bull slammed into the alien monster, horns driving deep into its side. The creature roared, clawing wildly. But the bull did not stop. Other bulls followed, ramming again and again. Wolves swarmed its legs, snapping at every joint. Birds dove at its eyes until black blood spilled down its face. Slowly, impossibly, the massive beast stumbled, then crashed to the ground. The earth shook as it fell, and for the first time, the alien line broke. The people of Ironvale roared in triumph. Civilians poured from their shelters. Soldiers raised their rifles high, and the handlers clung to their animals with tears in their eyes. The aliens had unleashed their worst, and humanity had answered. The beasts of Earth, once seen as tools or pets, had become warriors in their own right. Elias stood in the dust, his clothes torn, his body shaking. Round him, the animals gathered, bloodied but alive. He looked at the fallen alien creature, then at the sky. Somewhere up there, its masters had watched. They had seen their champion fall, and Elias knew this was not the end. It was only the beginning. For weeks after Ironvale, the galaxy felt strangely quiet. Colonies braced for the next attack. Fleets patrolled the skies, but no pods came. Some whispered that the aliens were regrouping. Others feared they were preparing something far worse. Elias, still recovering from the battle, spent his days walking among the animals. He checked on the scarred bull, now a symbol of hope across human space. Soldiers and civilians alike came to see it, laying flowers near its pen, as if it were more than an animal, as if it were a warrior who had fought for them. But Elias could not shake the unease. The silence felt wrong. The aliens had never shown hesitation before. They attacked, destroyed, and moved on. Why stop now? He voiced his fears at a military council, but many dismissed him. Perhaps they've learned, one general said. Perhaps they now know humanity cannot be broken. Elias only shook his head. No, they are not done. They've only changed their game. He was right. The first sign came when a deep space probe picked up something massive moving at the edge of human territory. At first they thought it was a fleet. Then the images came in clearer. It was a single ship, larger than any human had ever seen. its hull alive with shifting colors. And unlike before, it did not stay in orbit. It descended on the colony of Valor. People gathered as the alien craft landed in a storm of dust. Soldiers aimed their weapons. Animals were brought into readiness. But no pods fell. Instead, a ramp extended, and for the first time, the masters of the war beasts stepped onto human soil. They were tall, armored in chitin that gleamed like black glass. Their eyes burned with pale light, and their movements were slow, deliberate, as though each step declared ownership. They did not speak in words, but their presence carried a message. "We are here now," the commanders scrambled. Some wanted to strike immediately, to unleash everything they had before the aliens could act. Others argued for caution, for understanding, but the aliens did not wait. They unleashed a new kind of weapon, not beasts born of flesh, but hybrids half creature, half machine, towering constructs that howled with both organic pain and mechanical fury. They were not just bred for war, they were built for it. The first battle against these hybrids was unlike anything humanity had faced. The armored bulls that had once crushed war beasts found themselves impaled by mechanical claws. Wolves were torn apart by creatures that moved with impossible speed, metal limbs cutting faster than teeth could bite. Even the scarred bull, hero of Stonefield and Ironville, was struck down, its blood staining the earth as it fell. The handlers wept, soldiers screamed, but the aliens showed no mercy. For every human shot fired, a hybrid answered with devastation. The battlefield became a slaughterhouse. Elias watched in horror as the line broke. He shouted until his throat bled, calling to the animals, trying to rally them. Some fought on with desperate courage, but the hybrids were relentless. They were not like the beasts before. They did not fear, did not hesitate. They were controlled, as if every move was guided by a cold, alien hand. For the first time since Stonefield, Elias felt despair. Had humanity reached its limit? Then, in the chaos, something unexpected happened. A pack of wolves untethered, their handlers did not retreat. Instead, they turned as one, charging not at the hybrids, but at the alien commanders themselves. The aliens staggered, clearly unprepared for such direct defiance. Their glowing eyes flickered as the wolves snapped and clawed at them, dragging one down. For a moment, the hybrids faltered, moving slower, less precise. It was small, but Elias saw it, and he understood. The beasts were not just fighting other beasts. They were fighting their masters too. He seized a rifle from a fallen soldier, though he barely knew how to use it. At them, he roared, "Forget the hybrids, strike the masters." Soldiers round him, desperate and bloodied, obeyed. They turned their fire on the towering aliens. Bullets sparked against chitin, some breaking through. More wolves joined the attack. Even wounded bulls dragged themselves forward, horns lowered one last time. The battlefield shifted, just slightly, but enough. The aliens stepped back, raising their arms. A pulse of energy swept out, knocking men and beasts alike to the ground. When the dust cleared, the aliens were gone, retreating into their ship. The hybrids collapsed, lifeless husks without control. The silence that followed was worse than the noise. The ground was littered with the bodies of humans and animals alike. Victory could not be claimed, but survival barely was enough. Elias knelt beside the scarred bull's body, tears streaking his face. He had lost a friend, a warrior, yet in that grief burned a truth he could not ignore. The aliens were not untouchable. Their beasts, their hybrids, all of them depended on control. And when that control was broken, they faltered. Elias rose slowly, his hands clenched. Humanity had suffered, but it had learned something new. The war was no longer about beasts alone. It was about striking the hand that held the leash. The war had reached its breaking point. Across the colonies, people no longer looked at the skies with fear alone. They looked with fury. They had buried too many dead, seen too many homes burned, and mourned too many beasts that had fought at their side. Humanity had been tested, beaten down, and bled dry, but it had not been broken. And now, with the aliens revealed, the fight had changed. Elias knew at the moment he saw the hybrids full lifeless when their masters retreated. The aliens depended on control. The war beasts were dangerous, yes, but they were puppets. The true threat was the hand on the leash. If humanity wanted to survive, it had to cut that leash forever. The generals debated strategies, but Elias was the one who spoke the words that carried. "You've seen it," he said, voice steady though his eyes were heavy with loss. "They fall when their masters fall. This war is not about beasts anymore. It's about proving that humans cannot be mastered." So a plan was made, not to defend, not to hold ground, but to strike. A fleet would be gathered, not of warships alone, but of carriers filled with animals trained bulls, armored horses, wolves, lions, ducks, and birds of prey. Each colony sent what they could spare, as if the whole of humanity was placing its faith in the creatures it had raised. Some laughed at the madness of it. Others whispered that this was exactly what made humans dangerous, that they could turn anything into a weapon when survival demanded it. The chosen target was the alien command ship, the one that had landed on Valor. It had returned to orbit, waiting, watching. The time to hide was over. Humanity would meet it head-on. The day of the assault was unlike any other. The fleet rose through the black, engines burning bright against the void. Soldiers prayed quietly. Handlers whispered to their animals, and Elias stood at the center of it all. He had no rank, no title, but every eye turned to him. He was the man who had first seen a war beast hesitate, the one who had believed the Earth's creatures could fight back. He was the proof that humanity's strength was not in machines or weapons, but in its bond with the living world. The alien ship loomed before them, vast as a city, its hull pulsing with strange light. Pods began to launch, filling the space with swarms of beasts. But this time, humanity did not retreat. Doors opened on the carriers, and into the void surged a tide of life. Armored bulls tethered in harnesses, wolves fitted with thrusters, birds released with sensors guiding them. It was madness chaos, and yet it worked. The alien beasts snarled and struck, but they were met with equal fury. The void itself became a battlefield of tooth and claw. Then the moment came. The fleet pierced through, soldiers storming the alien ship. Elias was among them, his scarred hands gripping a rifle he barely knew how to use. Round him ran wolves, snarling and snapping, following him as if he were their alpha. They fought through dark corridors alive with alien light, cutting down hybrids that screamed with both mechanical and organic voices. The air stank of blood and ozone, but they pressed on. At last, they reached the core chamber. There the alien masters stood, tall and terrible, their glowing eyes fixed on the humans who dared to enter. For a heartbeat, silence fell. Then Elias stepped forward, wolves at his side, and raised his voice. "You thought us weak. You thought us prey. But we do not run. We do not bow. And we are never alone." The wolves leapt. Soldiers fired. The chamber became a storm of violence. The alien struck with claws of light, but the wolves tore at their limbs. Elias fought clumsily, desperately, until one alien loomed over him, arm raised to strike. In that instant, a bull brought impossibly into the ship by the handlers crashed through the chamber wall. Horns lowered. It struck the alien master with a force that shattered bone and armor alike. The room shook. Lights flickered, and suddenly the hybrids across the ship collapsed. The leash had been broken. One by one, the alien masters fell, overwhelmed not just by soldiers, but by beasts that refused to fear them. The last alien let out a sound that was not rage, but disbelief, as Elias' wolves dragged it down. Then silence filled the chamber, a silence of victory. When the fleet returned, carrying the wounded and the dead, humanity was forever changed. Colonists cheered not only for the soldiers, but for the animals that had fought beside them. Statues were raised, not of generals, but of bulls and wolves and birds, symbols of a truth the aliens had never understood. Elias returned to the fields at last. He rebuilt his farm, though it was no longer a place of quiet labor. Children came to see the animals, to hear the story of how beasts saved humanity. He walked among them, older now, but with a steady pride. He knew the war had not ended completely somewhere. other threats might rise. But humanity had shown the galaxy something that could never be forgotten. The aliens had unleashed their war beasts to terrify mankind, but humanity had always lived with monsters, and we had always tamed worse.